On the third night, we heard footsteps on the porch. There was no road, no trail, no reason for anyone to be there. We were 40 miles from the nearest town. My husband looked at me and said, "Don't move." Then we heard breathing right outside the window, slow, patient, like whatever was out there had been there for a very long time. We found out 4 days later who it was. I wish we never had. The setup. Make them feel safe before you take it away. My name is Claire. This is not a ghost story. I want to be clear about that up front. Because what happened to my husband and me that week in the mountains has a very human explanation. And sometimes, human is worse. It was September. Marcus and I had rented a cabin in the northern Cascades. A real one, not a resort. No Wi-Fi, no cell service past the first mile of the access road. The nearest neighbor was a property about 3 miles east that we were told sat empty most of the year. The owner of the cabin had emailed us instructions, a lockbox code, and one note at the bottom that we didn't think much of at the time. If you hear anything at night, it's just the wildlife. Black bear activity this season. Don't leave food outside. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. Late golden light through the pines, a wood stove we didn't know how to use, a porch with 2 rocking chairs facing a view that looked like it had been painted. Marcus called it the most beautiful place he'd ever been. The first night was completely quiet. The second night was mostly quiet. The third night, that's when it started. The first night, the sound that couldn't be explained. It was just past 2 a.m. I woke up for no reason I could identify. Not a sound, not a dream, just awake. The way you sometimes wake up when something in your body has registered something your mind hasn't caught yet. I lay there in the dark. The cabin was completely still. I could hear Marcus breathing beside me. I could hear the trees outside, that specific sound a pine forest makes at night, a kind of low, constant pressure. I've always loved that sound. Then I heard something different. Footsteps on the porch, slow and deliberate, not the random creak of a structure settling in the cold. This had a rhythm. Step, pause, step, pause. Moving from the left side of the porch toward the window beside our bed. I put my hand on Marcus's arm. He woke up immediately. He's a light sleeper. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He heard it too. We lay completely still for what felt like 3 full minutes. The footsteps had stopped near the window. I could see the window from the bed, just a rectangle of dark blue-black sky and the outline of trees. Nothing else. Then I heard breathing, not loud, not dramatic, just present, slow, measured. Breath in, breath out. A foot away from my head with only a single pane of glass between us. Marcus's hand found mine under the blanket. He squeezed it once, hard. Then he leaned to my ear and said, "Don't move. Don't make a sound." We stayed like that until the sky started to lighten. We didn't sleep again. In the morning, Marcus went out to the porch alone. He came back inside and sat down at the kitchen table without saying anything for a long time. Then he said, "There are footprints out there. Human ones. They go from the tree line to the window and back and forth, multiple times. It escalates. They decide to stay. They shouldn't have." We talked about leaving. I want to be honest about that. We talked about it for a long time that morning over coffee, sitting at the kitchen table, watching the tree line through the front window. We convinced ourselves it was a hiker. Someone who had gotten disoriented, stumbled onto our property in the night, maybe tried to check if anyone was home. It was bear country. We told ourselves anyone out there at 2 a.m. was probably more scared than we were. We decided to stay one more night. We locked the windows. We left the porch light on. That night was quiet. We slept. The night after, it was back, but different. This time we heard it before we were asleep, still early, maybe 11 p.m., and this time it wasn't just the porch. We heard movement around the entire perimeter of the cabin, slow, methodical, like a full circuit, front, side, back, side, front again. Marcus got up and grabbed the flashlight. He stood at the front door with his hand on the lock, and I remember watching him from the bedroom doorway, his silhouette just standing there, completely still. And I thought, whoever's outside that door knows exactly what they're doing. This is not random. This is not confused. This is intentional. Marcus shone the flashlight through the small window beside the door. The beam swept across the porch, the tree line, the side of the cabin. Nothing. But in the mud at the base of the porch steps, fresh boot prints, heading toward the cabin from the east, coming from the direction of the empty property 3 miles away. Face to face, the moment everything changed. On the 5th night, Marcus decided to go outside. I begged him not to. I used every argument I had. He said he couldn't spend another night waiting. He said he needed to know. He took the flashlight, his pocket knife, which felt laughably small against whatever I had been imagining. And he went out the back door while I watched from the window. I saw his light move across the yard, sweep the tree line, pause at the edge of the woods, and then go still. For about 30 seconds, his light didn't move. I pressed my face against the glass trying to see what he was looking at. I couldn't make out anything except the beam pointing into the trees. Then he came back inside. He locked the door behind him. He sat down. And then he said something I have replayed in my head every single day since. He said, "There's a man out there. He's just standing in the trees. He won't come out and he won't leave. He just stood there and looked at me." I asked him what the man looked like. Marcus said, "Old, maybe 60s, just standing there in regular clothes, no pack, no gear, nothing. Just standing in the trees in the pitch dark, 40 miles from anywhere, staring at our cabin." We barricaded the door with the kitchen table. We sat with our backs against the far wall with the lights off until morning. We didn't speak. We didn't sleep. At dawn, we packed everything into the car in 4 minutes and drove out. We didn't look back. I wanted to. I still don't know why I didn't. The truth, and why it's worse than any monster. 4 days after we got home, Marcus called the property owner to report what had happened. The owner was quiet for a long time after Marcus described the man. Then he said, "I know who that is." The property, 3 miles east, the one we'd been told was empty, had been owned for decades by a man named Howard. He had lived there year-round, alone, for most of his adult life. His wife had died. His children had moved away decades ago. He had no phone, no vehicle registered in the county. No one checked on him regularly. The owner told us that Howard had a habit, had always had it, of walking the properties around him at night. Not to cause harm, not because he was dangerous, just because he was lonely. Because after enough years alone in those woods, the only human contact he had was the occasional light in a neighboring window. The only proof that other people still existed in the world was finding a cabin that was occupied, and so he would walk to it and stand near it and listen to the sounds of people living inside. He had been doing it for years. Every renter who had ever stayed at our cabin had reported the same thing: footsteps, breathing, a figure in the trees. The owner had never told anyone because he didn't believe Howard was dangerous, because technically, Howard had never done anything wrong. He was just a man who had been alone so long that standing outside a stranger's window in the dark had become the closest thing he had to human connection. I've thought about Howard a lot since then, about what it takes, what kind of silence and years and absence to bring a person to that. About what that says about loneliness, about what that says about us, that even knowing the explanation, even knowing he meant no harm, knowing exactly who he was, I'm still afraid of the dark. There are stories that scare you because of what's out there in the dark. And then there are stories that scare you because of what's inside of us. Howard never hurt anyone. He never intended to. But he is the reason Claire sleeps with the curtains closed and the lights on in every room of her house, 3 years later, in a city apartment 40 miles from the nearest tree. The scariest things in the world are not the ones we can't explain. They're the ones we can. If you have a true story, something that happened to you that you haven't been able to make sense of, send it to us. Link in the description. Subscribe to Beyond the Map Stories. And if you're watching this somewhere remote, maybe check that the curtains are closed. We'll see you in the next one.